Awesome. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to attend this webinar. We'll just give this a couple of minutes for the first few people to start and for the first few people to join us, and then we'll kick things off. I'll already share my screen. Give me 1 second. While we wait for everyone to join. Can you see my screen, Sid?
Oh yeah, looking good.
Perfect. All right, I'll just give everyone a couple more seconds and then we'll kick things off. The good news about this webinar is that it is being recorded. So if you're missing this banter in the beginning, don't worry. We'll get you covered in an email follow-up.
All of my dad jokes that are coming out of this are going to be memorialized in this recording, so you're not going to miss much, you know.
I mean, with a name like mine, Haakon, and then you have Ragnarok, I'm worried if anyone has kind of mistaken this for a new episode of the Vikings or something. But no,
absolutely,
that is not the case.
Should call this the big swings from berserkers, you know.
Exactly. But no, we're here to start another fantastical journey on marketing efforts in the current year 2024. That's it.
But we are on a long trip. That's the one catch.
That's true. That's true. All right, but with that being said, let's get started. Just a couple of housekeeping items to mention to begin with. As I mentioned, there will be an email going out to all attendees of this webinar of a recording. And you can pose questions to either me or Stephen, which we will take towards the end of this webinar. We aim to talk for about 25-30 minutes of this presentation, and the remaining 15 or so, whatever time we have left, we'll take your questions. So yeah, this is what we'll be talking about today, very simply. I think you've read the brief as well, but a very warm welcome to everyone. So excited for you to join us here today. As I mentioned in the beginning, but in case you missed it, my name is Haakon Birkeland, and Stephen has practiced his pronunciation, haven't you? Give you a 10 out of 10 earlier.
Yes, Haakon, I have.
Thank you. That's another 10 out of 10. But I'm an enterprise customer success manager here at OneSignal. And as I mentioned, I'm hailing from Norway, but I'm actually based in London with the team here in Europe at OneSignal. And we got with us Stephen. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Stephen Aldrich. I'm our co-founder, co-CEO here at Ragnarok. Started the business a little over 12 years ago, and I am located in the great city of brotherly love, Philadelphia.
Love it. I'm pretty sure the Vikings at one point went to visit Philadelphia, by the way, if I know my history right.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. I'd love to learn a little bit more about Ragnarok actually and what you do as a business before I also talk a little bit about OneSignal. So yeah, take it away, Stephen.
Yeah, for sure. So just to give a little bit of background on what Ragnarok is and what we do. So we are very unique and we sort of blend kind of traditional marketing strategy with MarTech expertise. So think that kind of takes the form of having a sort of highly technical strategic resource that serves our clients and kind of helping to grow and expand the amount of revenue they're driving from their MarTech and marketing investment. We do that in the form of actual campaign strategy management. Through the creating more personalized and really individualized experiences. So we're not kind of your typical marketing agency that sort of sets up more of a foundational program. We do much more of the personalization build out and really focus on developing things at scale. We develop mostly automation programs. And then we also bolt on the tools that are necessary to do that, whether it's a marketing automation platform like OneSignal, or a customer data platform or an analytics tool that helps to kind of drive a little bit more data to sort of work with within the marketing ecosystem.
Love it. And I personally work very closely with you with some of my customers. Personally, I am representing OneSignal here today. And if you don't know already, we're a platform who's built to maximize engagement and minimize churn across multiple messaging touchpoints, that being either push, in-app, iOS, live activities, SMS. And our focus is very much on making it as simple and as efficient for marketing teams to get their messages sent out, personalized, automated at scale. No matter how large your team is, or whether you're working with developers, integrating with our APIs and SDKs is there to, with the marketing team in mind, to help you guys build the most sophisticated messaging in OneSignal dashboard. And as I kind of mentioned, I work regularly with Ragnarok in my role, looking after the largest enterprise customers across EMEA that OneSignal has. I have one customer, large media brand in the UK, currently onboarding, where you guys are stepping in, helping them getting those initial things set up. So yeah, that's a little bit of how I work with you. I don't know if you want to expand on that, Stephen.
Yeah, for sure. So beyond just what we kind of think about as like an onboarding or supporting our joint clients being successful in their initial use cases on OneSignal, we also support clients in more sophisticated build outs within using the OneSignal platform, whether that be sort of multi-channel or advanced personalization use cases or segmentation use cases, as well as interconnecting data from different sources. And then lastly, we actually support a lot of our clients in their MarTech vendor evaluation process, of which OneSignal is often a part of that, being such a great kind of best in breed solution. And we help our clients kind of navigate those selection processes and to understand where OneSignal shines and how to best leverage it for whatever part of their life cycle they may be in.
Awesome. So now that everyone here knows a little bit about us, let's move into the focus of this webinar, which is a lot of what you just touched on, Stephen, namely the best practices to supercharge marketing strategies and those big swings to drive value to your business. Because we recognize that for many marketing teams today, there's this constant pressure to drive short-term wins and meet immediate goals. And we also know that at the same time, investing in the long-term brand building initiatives is essential for that sustained growth and competitiveness in the long term. So the strategies and even the metrics that we use to measure success today is often very different from short-term and long-term initiatives, which again adds another layer of complexity when determining where you should allocate your resources, no matter the size of your team. And especially for leaner teams, it's that pressure to prioritize immediate wins can be even higher. So today we're going to explore strategies that can help marketing teams make those big swings in order to build a strategic approach to marketing that can underline both the short-term tactics and long-term brand building initiatives. And what we want to talk about today is how we can sort of holistically approach this, achieving your objectives, which is driving sales, engagement, growth, and retention. But before we get into specifics, you guys in Ragnarok, Stephen, you have a really effective growth model that underlines this approach for your customers. Do you want to talk us through this a little bit?
Yes, and this is a really good way to kind of anchor where do you start and where you kind of end in a sort of typical marketing automation maturity curve is a good way to think about this. And the idea here is a lot of folks, especially if you're a smaller team, there's a couple of things that creates a small team, right? One is when the size of the program isn't large enough to warrant a larger team, which we'll see. That's not true across the board, by the way. There are plenty of. Second thing is a team that is lean, although they manage a fairly large program. We work with some folks who have maybe 100 million, 100 million plus emails and phone numbers and push tokens that they have within their sort of database, and they're like 5 people. So it can really vary depending on like how the structure of the company is built. And what this sort of reflects, though, is a way to think about how to sort of assess, where am I today in terms of my program, and to kind of give sort of high level targets of how do I mature my program in a way that allows me to build more scale as I start to without necessarily adding more bodies to the mix. But maybe adding more specializations, and that can be either the same person sort of becoming more competent in a certain area, or it can come from additional team members that you bring in, or agencies, or whoever will sort of give you that particular strength. So typically with a lot of the programs that we see, they're somewhere at that foundations or growth stage, which is relatively what we would see within a OneSignal platform, right? These are folks who are maybe coming from a less sophisticated platform, or this is sort of their first foray into mobile messaging or anything sort of activating multiple channels. They don't necessarily have sophisticated programs, but they have things like welcomes and reset passwords and really kind of nascent early engagement type programs. And from here, it kind of gives us a direction to say, like, well, if I want to move from foundations to growth, for example, what are the three things that I should focus on, and how should I evaluate every future program that I'm going to do against this sort of checklist of goals? So, if I'm in a foundations program, I have a lot of open opportunity. And so things like critical customer communication is going to be the sort of natural first step, right? Things like abandonment, things like that maybe like a welcome onboarding or a win back, like really kind of the sort of table stakes of any engagement program. Whereas doing simple things like understanding the consumer mindset, like understanding how does somebody kind of flow through my funnel. If I'm a gaming app, for example, maybe I have sort of levels or achievements that somebody goes through as they progress, through my app. It's possible that I might see people kind of naturally come back as they are eager to kind of come through and sort of see what the next level unlocks. But I need a way to sort of nurture them throughout that experience. And perhaps the sort of game theory of I want to sort of achieve the next thing is the consumer mindset, but it could also be something more along the lines of this is my idle time, or this is my if we're targeting busy parents, i.e. me, this is my 30 minutes while my kid's napping, let me go brain dead for a little bit. But these are the sort of like kind of high level things we want to focus on. Whereas if we move towards one of the more the later stages, we're really doing kind of more advanced personalization type mechanisms, things like segmenting down to sort of meaningful small cohorts to make sort of very different experiences, things we call micro segmentation. Or we're using machine learning to dictate what is the next best channel that somebody should activate with. What do they have a propensity to do? These are much kind of further down. You don't necessarily need to jump from, a reset password to an AI model, right? There's a progressive means of growing here, because the level of sophistication that you need to have in your team to actually not only run an AI model effectively, like actually do it with the correct inputs and clean data, but also to be able to make incremental dollars off of that, it requires a certain volume of audience. It requires a certain understanding of how to leverage the different outputs and how to test it. You don't need to jump there when you have things like abandoned cart kind of in front of you. And so this model also sort of helps dictate what is that natural next step you should do.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of this webinar, not to pat our own backs too much, but I think that what we're going to go into here, we have three big swings, and the first one is coming up right now. It's applicable on a broad scale to any size, any team, no matter the level of sophistication. These are basically the trends we see happening right now that for marketers in this day and age just have to think about. And luckily, we have a lot of interesting stats and sort of take home practical advice to dive into. So without further ado, the first big swing, personalization and segmentation. Now, some stats for you. The average smartphone user last year received 46 push notifications in a single day. So from a marketing perspective, that's 46 opportunities to engage your users and drive conversions. But let's face it, as a consumer like me, it could easily be 46 reasons to uninstall a mobile app. And that number is not just counting for push. It's also, we need to recognize the dozens of other transactional or promotional messages that people receive every single day through email, SMS, in-app messaging, So if the world at large is consuming content through a digital fire hose, essentially, then the only way to stand out is to adapt with the current environment we find ourselves in, which as a marketer we've been doing, for decades, and now in the 2020s, that means mobile first. That means designing the user engagement strategies around highly relevant and personalized messaging. And we recently published our annual engagement report called the State of Customer Engagement. And for this, we surveyed more than 700 marketing and growth roles, analyzed data from more than 4 trillion messages that OneSignal sent in 2023. So the stats that we're going to show you are very well backed by strong data points. And here are 2 findings from that report that highlight the fundamental importance of personalization and segmentation. So notifications that are able to tap into personalizing content have a 344% higher engagement rate than notifications that don't. And apps that segment their audience earn 57% higher engagement rates than those who don't as well, which are staggering numbers. So the way we define message personalization, it basically means tailor marketing messages to individual customers based on their needs, interests, behaviors, and preferences. And at its core, this is achieved through a collection on and segmentation of customer data. And through this data, businesses can tailor their marketing efforts individually to help users take action based on past behavior and existing needs. And personalization helps customers feel like the platform is adapting to you, the user, instead of the other way around, how you use the app as opposed to, how they want you to use their app, which is a painful experience for a lot of users. And the more you're able to provide a convenient, timely, and contextual messaging strategy, the better your users feel like they understand them, the more likely they are to continue building a relationship with you. And as with any relationship, it's important that both parties feel heard. I'm not going to get too deeper into that from like a personal perspective, but does your current marketing strategy, it's important to ask yourself if your current marketing strategy is able to embody this. Are you able to sort of listen and iterate and adapt to all the different individuals who receive your messages? So yeah, I did have another slide here on data tags, which is essentially what a segmentation is built off of. It's your vehicle for achieving segmentation within OneSignal specifically. So this is where you're able to separate and organize and target users based off of how they interact with your platform. And it's one of the most powerful features we have in order to achieve targeting and engagement. Tags are basically comprised of 2 things. It's a key and a value. And these keys allow you to name the tag. So for example, a very simple example here is purchase equals true or false. Or if you're a mobile game, you can be current level equals 10, 15, 0. And these tags are the building blocks again for segments. So for example, you can target customers who've made a purchase with a discount code to make the second purchase, and you can even address them by their first name if you have that as a personalization tag. As the example here on the screen shows you, it's to George upgrading their Podcast Pro. So we're able to pick up those things within OneSignal and send George a highly relevant message that is based on his use case and usage of the platform, where he is with you. And yeah, I do have a question for you, Stephen, especially for clients with limited resources. What are some of the quick wins they can achieve with personalization and segmentation?
Yeah, so this is a really good, just kind of echoing the back of what we have here with data tags and just some of the kind of basic personalization mechanisms, and especially what you are seeing in your state of engagement report, which, unfortunately messages is, fairly reliable to use as a benchmark for sure in terms of what you should be doing. So I'm going to kind of pull two things off of that I think is the most interesting. One is around sort of segmentation, which is to say, how do I actually think about, doing segmentation from, let's use push messaging as a channel, right? And this is where, sometimes we tend to fall off a little bit, because most push messaging is sort of looking at or reacting to the absence of something happening, right? Like, let's say, again, going back to our favorite gaming app, or a gaming app example here, that for a client that we've jointly had, that shall not be named for copyright reasons or whatever reasons that legal teams don't want you saying their names. But they had a program that they wanted to put in place around, we'll call them lapsed users, right? Which is essentially at 2 days, at 3 days, at 7 days, at 10 days, if somebody wasn't coming back into the app for, to get to the next level or whatever sort of achievement that they had within their goal for that week, they had sort of a rotating list of things that could be done every week. There would be sort of different messages that would prompt them to come back, and they were the same message effectively, right? And every time you would hit sort of the 2-day threshold, you would get basically the same message again. So let's say you came back on day 3 after the day 3 push message came in. You then lapsed for 2 more days. You got the same message again on day 2, the same message again on day 3, right? It wasn't really segmented, right? And yet having that program in place is a great foundational program. Like, we want a reactivation or re-engagement journey, but there's a really simple way to kind of think about the volume of messaging that somebody gets. Now, again, not everybody actually, of the 44 push notifications you get, 43 of which for me would be, Gmail or Slack. The one that's sort of the one that you want to stand out there. People need something different to prompt them, right? Like, if the first one didn't work, you can either assume they didn't see it, or they didn't really engage with it. It's not really like email. Like, push is a little bit more obtrusive, so it's a little bit less like email in terms of, there's not really an open rate concept, right? It's a pretty high open rate, so to speak, because unless it's buried in the notification center, it's pretty likely that somebody would have seen it at some point. What we could do there is sort of recycle or refresh the messaging, right? And that's a simple segmentation concept, right? Let me look at people who have received this before, and I know a lot of people are going to get this. It's a pretty high volume of people that are going to, we need to reactivate every 2 or 3 days, and let me cycle a different message in, on day 2 if they've seen this message already, or on day 3 if they've seen this message already, and maybe I have 4 or 5 of these. And my small team that I'm working with just simply has to kind of build out a sort of journey concept that says, okay, on day 2 you get this message. If you don't reactivate on day 3, you get this message. Okay, when you re-enter this journey, if you've already received day 2 message, you now get day 2 V2 message, and then you go down the V2 path. If you've already received the V2 path, you go down the V3 path. If you see the V3, you go down V4, etc. And eventually you just reset them, right? Oh, now you go back here and you reset the cycle, right? Which is something that you can achieve fairly easy by using sort of different holdouts for when people can kind of re-enter journeys as rules, or just using sort of simple tags on users, right? So that's kind of one method. The second is around kind of the personalization mechanism here, right? Like, how do we actually make content that's compelling enough that somebody's going to want to come back, right? There's this really interesting feature now on iOS where if you don't unlock your phone, right, if you're sort of looking at the lock screen, it gives you a preview, but it doesn't actually give you the content of what the preview is. So you get like Gmail notification or Slack, and it's just like icon with very minimal information, right? I think that's really powerful because it sort of gives you that kind of chance to say, well, what is this? What is happening here? It's a nice little like mystery iOS theater here that's going on. And I like this idea of being able to sort of use some personalization within that to say, well, I know when they unlock it, they're going to see this message, but I want this message to be something that's going to be compelling enough for them to open the app and to re-engage. In this example of our gaming app, one of the sort of things that we did in our kind of recycled content, if you will, is to further personalize that. We sort of used the last activity that they left off with and encourage them to come back and complete it. So whether it was, you've just hit level 2, let's get to level 3, or, name of character says, yeah, I don't know. We had some like weird different types of things to experiment with, but because it was sort of reflective of something that we could trigger a memory in them, or something where we could make it a little bit more, just something a little bit more relevant to them. When you kind of unlock it and you see it, that it just becomes something that's a little bit more engaging, as opposed to like, come back to the app, like we wanted to do something that's a little bit more interesting. So these were like two kind of concepts around how you can kind of do this. And again, this is not hard stuff, right? Like essentially what you're looking at is, what is the last engagement that I have? What are things like fact things, like what level are you on? Is there a character this week that I can tag into? Is there like different messages that I can do? And some of the stuff, like you literally just throw it in a chat GPT and come up with 20 different variations and just play around with that as a starting point, right? It's not a whole lot of effort, but yet it's a pretty big swing when you think about it, because you went from maybe 5 possible messages that somebody could receive. Now you have 30 plus however many variations that personalization there is.
Yeah, and I think if we're using the push as an example, I think you only have that much space for characters and information in order to grab anyone's attention. So the shorter and more relevant possible that a push notification can be, the higher the likelihood it is for you to stand out. And George, upgrade to Podcast Pro. That already tells a lot about that user and their experience with your app, and you're able to convey that within like the microsecond you have to grab that user's attention. So I think the simpler and personalized, the better. I'm going to move on, just conscious of time. I'm going to dive into swing number 2, because personalization is great, but what if I told you personalization can also be automated, which is what we're going to dive into now. Basically, and not just across one channel, but you can automate personalization across multiple channels, because in the most basic sense, marketing automation software allows you to automatically scale marketing campaigns that otherwise would have to be pieced together manually. And we at OneSignal have some tools, which we'll show you in just a moment, on how this can basically scale across all the channels of choice. And again, it helps the user get an amazing experience with you, because they can choose how to interact with you on the channel of their choice, where they are, and you maximize the chances for them being primed to receive the message at their channel of choice. And bringing up the engagement report again, it's super clear from our research that if you have campaigns that utilize a single messaging channel, you're clearly missing out, because unifying the customer experience across multiple channels, you create that environment where users can smoothly transition between email, between push, in-app messaging without having like a disjointed experience, which again builds trust. They know they understand you, and it's this omnichannel approach also allowed for more contextually relevant interaction. For example, a user might receive a push notification about a new feature, followed by an in-app message providing detailed instructions on how to use that feature, and then an email afterwards where you summarize all the recent activity and offering tips, more rich, and you just have more content on one page. So when this campaign, even if this campaign that I just made up could be for the same feature, the user experiences a dialogue that moves between them and complements sort of each other across the preferred channels. So when it comes to juggling multiple channels with a diverse audience across mobile, web, it may seem a lot to manage. But before I move forward, let me just quickly do one sentence about each of these channels and what they're sort of best suited for. You have email, which delivers detailed, personalized messaging directly in the inbox, great for long form content, direct communication and engagement. Mobile push, on the other hand, is great for those timely updates. In the moment, open the app type of messages. Web push as well, great for desktop and or mobile website users, giving you that non-intrusive way of delivering updates and promotions without the need of an app. And then in-app messages, Doesn't require any form of subscription at all. You could basically seamlessly integrate it with the app experience. SMS, we all know and love. I don't know if we all do, but it's there, and we have to deal with it. And it does drive value in a lot of markets, especially. Really effective for time-sensitive promotions and transactional messages. Then you have live activities, which is a relatively new channel. Great for real-time experiences and providing opportunities for engagement. And lastly, social media plays a really important role. Great for if you have a presence there to share and build a community. So now that that's out of the way and looking at the time, I want to make sure that we have questions. That we have time for questions here. Devising a compelling sort of content across channels, orchestrating this cohesively is something that we offer through OneSignal, which with journeys. This really enables you to scale and automate any sort of say there's an onboarding goal that you have, or a re-engagement goal, or a retention goal. I have a lot of customers who see a lot of success with this. And focusing on the first example just for a little bit, where you can create a personalized onboarding experience, helping users familiarize themselves with the features and functionalities, and with a successful onboarding sequence, touching multiple channels at different times of the day, at different visits of the app. We see a much higher feature adoption and app retention overall. I think in the interest of time, I'll just quickly run through our favorite example, which is abandoned cart. It's just a very easy way to illustrate when a user has added an item to a shopping cart but did not complete the purchase. You may want to send them a discount or an in-app message, or with inactive user campaign. There's a lot I could potentially dig into here, but I did want to make sure that we have time for questions. So real quick, Stephen, what advice would you give small teams looking to scale communication without sort of overwhelming their resources across channels?
Yeah, so I think, for one, certainly using tools like this, right, like journey type programs is certainly kind of a starting point. I'll kind of give you an example of there's a national grocery chain that we worked with that I think did something that was really interesting, which is, when you talk about having not very many resources available, it's sometimes it's the absence of behavior that it's more easy to get to than it is the targeting actual behavior. So let's say, for an example, in our national grocery chain that has a rewards program, like most grocery chains do, right? Your little key fob thing, or keychain, little tag sticker thing that you scan to get your coupons at the checkout. So this grocery chain that we worked with had this rewards program that would sort of activate, and as you hit certain purchase thresholds, you would unlock incremental awards, right? So something like for every $100 you spend, you get $5 back effectively, but it would be on like, maybe some items get a bigger discount versus just straight cash. Like, if you were to apply your credits towards fruit, maybe it's worth, every credit's worth 2, as opposed to if you just do it for a straight dollar, it's worth 1. So they had this really kind of unique system to do it. It was a little kind of sophisticated, but what they found was that there's sort of this juicy threshold where if somebody were to shop, come to the grocery store and shop at least every single week, right, which is what you're trying to create a grocery store, is basically habitual buyers, or they found that the people who did that got the best rewards. The people who got the best rewards were less likely to go to competitors because they were actually saving, maybe $50, $60 a week on their grocery bill because of the rewards plus whatever sort of in-store offers that they would have, which compared to other grocery stores in the area, that might be 2 or 1.5 times more in savings, and where all prices are relatively the same. So this was significant enough for them to kind of try to create this habitual behavior. So what we did is we looked at the absence of purchases to actually drive the sort of automation program. Again, something that you can do with because you have purchase data within the system, or that's something that's kind of table stakes that you would likely have, or at least something that indicates that a purchase happens, you can look for the essence of a purchase, say in 7 days. If I haven't seen a purchase in 7 days, I'm going to start this, this kind of re-engagement program at that point. And I'm going to do things like either incentivize by saying, you are X dollar threshold away from your next reward. Come in and shop. Your savings last week was X, or your month-to-date savings or your year-to-date savings. Again, more of that kind of personalization type mechanisms. Those things might be a little bit beyond reach depending on what available resources you have and what level of personalization. That would, of course, be sort of a next evolution of that. But just that factor of, 7 days of no purchase. On day 8, we're going to start the re-engagement program. We're going to use push notifications to get people to sort of prompt them to go into the app and see what rewards they have available. But then also reinforce that with email, where we can actually show specific items that are on sale that week. So we would have a I think of it like a catalog of on sale items that was available for them to pull in through those email templates. We'd also reinforce that with in-app notifications at a similar type of concept, where if they sort of organically open up that push notification, how do we show them the most important information, where it was like, these are the things on sale, these are what your savings are month to date. Again, trying to create that habitual buyer. And then as sort of like a last, for this specific program, they did some SMS with it, but the SMS was more around like month to date savings and like trying to unlock the full savings within that month. So we would do something around the bands of like, you've spent or you've saved $60 so far this month. Every time you come, you save an average of $50, $40, something like that. Something to kind of reinforce the value. We just didn't find the SMS was necessarily like driving folks to come back into the store as much as like the push and the email was, but still we tried to use as many channels as possible. But all this was just created off the concept, I'm sort of saying what the end state was. The original state was, 7 days of no purchase on day 8, start this re-engagement, and then keep rolling it every week to kind of drive people to come back and create that habitual buyer, and then start with things like average stats, right? Average people save $80 or $60 a week when they shop, at us versus anybody else. So that's like a pretty easy, again, pretty big swing in terms of a program. Like, you're kind of starting something that doesn't exist, but you don't necessarily need to over-engineer a solution here for it.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I think that one thing I wanted to call out as well is with OneSignal, once you've sort of defined the journey or the triggers or the events, that the user experience will be quote unquote unique for that user as and when they hit those triggers, when they've made that purchase, when like it's timely, it's within their journey that they're having with you as a user. It's just up to you as a marketer to sort of try to define what are the most common experiences that we have and how can we tag, segment, and schedule our messages ahead of time so that people can receive them exactly at the right point.
Yeah.
All right, last swing, and I won't spend too much time here, but I did want to touch on it because it's super important. Like in OneSignal, there's already a lot of data available, but we recognize that a lot of customers already use a mixed panel or an apps flyer, and connecting with the existing data that you have is really important, and we want to enable our customers to leverage existing integrations to use that user data with limited sort of engineering resources that has to be involved in order for you to make that happen. Because data is, as we know, can I go back here? Yeah, we can. Let me actually jump into the next one here, because leveraging integrations helps unlock user data for you. With a unified tech stack, you're able to update customer data live and make sure that experience is as personalized as it possibly can be, linked with your CRM data or what have you. It's all very scalable. The variety of data you're able to process really helps. The real-time processing makes it really easy for things to just happen quickly. It's also incredibly cost efficient. We want to make sure that you get the money from your software licenses that you have across the board. We don't want to add anything additional to that as much as possible. And yeah, you in your organization, you probably have a larger infrastructure of customer data. And this gives you that flexibility and sort of democratization of data that you need. I had a question for you, Stephen, and you can sort of, I'll switch over to this slide to just highlight some of the partners that we integrate with that have different strengths and use cases. But how do you see small teams leveraging data effectively without being overwhelmed by like the complexity that data management might seem for some?
Yeah, so this is always going to be a challenge, especially for marketing folks who maybe are less kind of technical and don't really understand where necessarily the data is coming from. So the approach I like to generally take across the board is to sort of define, at sort of the use case level, right? So I'd mentioned like a re-engagement program in my last example around a national grocery chain, right? And that re-engagement program was driven off of purchase. So purchase in and of itself is a piece of data. It's sourced from, if we kind of think about how do we like break down this use case and like where are the different elements of it, and using that as a way to kind of understand, not only like how to sort of manage the data, but also how to kind of navigate it and use it in a way that's effective. If I kind of take that re-engagement concept and I understand that purchase is the data that triggers it, the first thing I would sort of do is kind of break it down, that use case into sort of these three different areas. The first would be like, how do I identify like people who did this thing, right? How do I identify people who purchased? From a data management perspective, I would know that is from a credit card transaction or a cash transaction that happens at the register. There's also people who could purchase online, maybe through our in-store pickup or delivery. So we have different mechanisms that purchase data can be sourced from, but I understand the source of that data is a transaction that somebody had either in our app or in store. The second thing I would then ask myself is, how can I best access it, right? Is it, we look at so many e-commerce tools like Shopify and some of these other tools that just have kind of native, marketing messaging kind of built to their platform, but it's very limited in terms of what you can customize. There's not a whole lot of, variability in terms of what you can do. So it's not, it may be the easiest to access there, but it's not the best place that I can access it, right? So it's kind of understanding, all right, well, I need to get this transaction data available to me within OneSignal. So how will I go about doing that? And this is a great example of where a tool like Mixpanel would come into play, where maybe Mixpanel is directly receiving the point of sale data and it's getting it from the app, and maybe it's only getting it from the app. Whereas Segment might be getting the point of sale data that actually happens in store. So I have basically two sources of data for one transaction, right? And then the sort of last thing to kind of think about is, what is the most basic way that I can get that information? Well, if I have it within Segment and then I have it separately within Mixpanel, and aside from the fact that I could probably just hook up Segment to send that data to Mixpanel and get it all from there, but let's say that's not possible for me for whatever reason, right? I would instead maybe hook them both up into OneSignal, and I would add just a simple attribute or tag on the user's profile that would say something like date of last purchase. And I could use that as my, to kind of query off of that, my re-engagement to say, has it been more than 7 days since date of last purchase, assuming date of last purchase exists, right? I could create that same concept in Mixpanel, but I can add other things to it. Maybe what I want to do is look at people who, for example, one of the most powerful things about Mixpanel is their kind of cohorting ability, and the fact that I could blend in not only what was their last date of purchase, but I could also look at what was their threshold of purchase. Did they spend over $300? Did they spend between $300 and $200? Did they spend less than $200? What was their month-to-date spend? I could kind of add all these different events or behaviors into a single cohort, and I could actually sync that into OneSignal. And that would give me the ability to do some really kind of more sophisticated journeys, like I sort of illustrated before, where the very basic re-engagement is something like, it's day 8, I start the series, but maybe now it's day 8 and I sort of tell you your month to date savings, or I tell you, not just what's on sale this week, but maybe what rewards you have and things like that. I could use Mixpanel to kind of create those cohort definitions that makes it a little bit more personalized. And then kind of in that framework as well, like if that basic way, what is the most basic way to get that information? If I can just get the cohort out of Mixpanel to create the journey within OneSignal, or to use as the trigger for that journey, that's really simple for me, right? And again, as a small team, I can't have too many tools to work with, right? There's just not enough brain space and too many logins and all the pain that goes with kind of trying to manage and pay attention to these things. So that's why I really like these tools like that really kind of work well together, like this OneSignal Mixpanel apps flyer segment. Same concept if I have sort of a new person who's come in, maybe I'm having somebody who's downloaded the app for the first time. I can use that kind of apps flyer data that gives me what was the source where that person came from, to be able to do maybe more custom onboarding for that person. Let's say I'm running a meta campaign, and that meta campaign consists of an offer during onboarding, where if they give me their email or they download the app, I can then, translate that information. Oh, this person came in from, a paid campaign. This person came in from some other campaign. I could be able to tag the user in that way, and then be able to actually continue to like segment their onboarding to say things like, all right, well, I'm going to reinforce the coupon that they would have gotten when they installed the app, or I'm going to, I understand that this is a paid customer, and so I'm really eager to convert them. I might extend their onboarding more than I would an organic user, is probably likely to come in anyway. So lots of ways that I can kind of do some really kind of sophisticated, again, more personalized journeys. And all I'm using is sort of the built-in native capabilities of these tools. And they're all very, even if I'm a small team, and again, I have a small budget, something like Mixpanel is free to a certain point. Segment has a very lucrative kind of a startup pricing, same thing with Apps Flyer. And these are some really powerful features I can tap into from a marketing team perspective. I don't necessarily have to blow all my budget on, the additional capability. And they're very easy to set up. So that's maybe where I would, if I think about like how to not get overwhelmed by it, it's more like, let me find the tool that's got everything that I need and use that as my kind of jumping off point to execute whatever type of automation I want to run.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanna stop there and see if they have any questions, and I do see we have some. So thanks so much for listening, guys. I know we've talked a lot, so let's dive into the questions. We have one from David here. I think this is mostly on the OneSignal side. So a lot of the sequence strategies that we're talking about, David says is reproducible and in a best practice sort of glide plan. So does OneSignal measure and consolidate some of the best practices in sequence building and personalization tactics that we can all refer to and experiment with? Yes. So unless you've not known about this resource already, David, our documentation center hosts a lot of great examples for users who've not experimented with journeys before. It's a super rich resource, which is very well documented and is also branching out to the different things we're talking about today. So whenever you want to talk about or whenever you want to build in your journey, you need to think about your personalization and segmentation elements, which you can read about there. But when it comes to the most common best practices that I recommend my customers to do, which even large enterprise brands, doing a solid onboarding journey and a solid retention journey, if you've not done that before, would be my best places to start. And my other recommendation there is to start small. So without thinking that you know your audience, which I'm sure you do, in reality, the first time you're experimenting with a journey, you might not know exactly how it's going to turn out. So instead of going on with a lot of different steps all at once, I would recommend experimenting with what works. And in the analytics report for journeys, you can very easily see how they perform. So I would start small, start with a couple of steps, depending on which channels that you're using. Push, in-app, email, great starting points to educate your customers on an onboarding experience, and also to retain them once they've been inactive, all of which we're able to track natively via the SDK on OneSignal. So not a lot of advanced tagging needed for you to get started. Another one from David. Where can we learn more about using the new live activities feature? We have a lot of stuff on our website on this particular topic, both sort of marketing material, but also more detail if you want to get into the technical side of things. I don't know, Stephen, have you had much experience with live activities and in your customer base? It's a relatively new channel if we're talking, email, SMS, push,
Yeah.
but it's seeing a lot of traction, hasn't it?
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing a lot more of it recently. When it came out, it was very like, well, I'm not watching a sports game right now. But there is some interesting things I've seen people do around almost using it like a countdown clock in a way, where you sort of have these, we'll call them like live type events, or they're really faked, but they're like live events that would happen. And say there's like you have sort of a limited. This is a really good a good like e-commerce use case, but you'd have like an hour-long flash sale, and you would use the live activity again to create a fake event where you're saying, flash sale on now, it's counting down from 60 minutes down to 0, right? And you sort of have this like clock, and what you're doing is you're kind of you're driving people to kind of like make a purchase decision within like a very limited amount of very limited window. We sort of tested it more from like or I've seen this concept more tested as like a sort of broader, like across the entire user base. It'd be really interesting to kind of use it on an individual basis to like give somebody like, almost like an abandoned cart offer at the point at which they sort of add things to their cart, but then they have the live activity starts and they get a coupon offer that they only have a little bit amount of time to use. There's definitely a lot of things I think we can kind of mimic gamification that we might have in kind of media or gaming apps in the shopping experience. That'd be interesting to play around with. Again, I've only seen it really on kind of a broad level, not on the individual level. But it has been successful from what I've seen. I'm not going to say it's like quite huge yet, but I think it's so early on that you have to port the live activity from the device. So certainly I've seen it more on the iOS side of things where it is, but also it's you kind of have to like set up the controls in place to be able to support that activity, right? If you're a sports app or something like that, there's already a limited window. But if you're an e-commerce store, you have to like create a coupon code that expires in an hour, and there's some back-end stuff, operation stuff needs to be done to do that. But yeah, it's so far I'd say it's very promising. So I think there's definitely a lot more ripe for experimentation.
Yeah. So the sports use case, I think everybody is familiar with.
Yeah.
Second thing I'd like to add is that it's very popular for the super users and your biggest fans of the app. They tend to want to have something on their screen because they use you very often. So having that live interactive element, whether it's, I don't know, a shipping order, you don't necessarily need to be a fan to know where your shipping order is, but that's another use case, just to see where and when it's dispatched and how close it is and stuff like that. But generally, live activity use cases are geared often towards and see the most success of the super users, we'd say. But that's everything we got time for today. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you everyone listening at home for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thanks again.
Yeah, hope everyone has learned something new today, and yeah, it's been great to chat with you, Stephen.
You too, Haakon. Everybody have a good one. Bye.
Have a good one, guys.